I'm glad you liked Memories of Murder.
Oh my God, I loved it so much.
Let's talk about it on
Yeah.
this show, which is called Never Did It, about people watching movies, and those people are you and me. I'm Brad Garoon. You're Jake Ziegler. The year is 2003.
Well, 2003, but we also kind of sort of broke our own rule here because it didn't come out in the States until 2005, but it was playing in South Korea in 2003 and us and other countries as well.
It's interesting because both of the movies that we're discussing today are international films, excuse me. Neither of them are American movies. Well, we'll get into an American movie, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
neither of them are the primary ones we're talking about. But since you just watched Memories of Murder,
Yes.
I gave it to you because I watched it a couple years ago and it's freaking awesome. I mostly love this movie because of a dropkick that happens off a hill. In like the most surprising, crazy moment. Well, it's not the craziest moment of the movie. This movie's bonkers, but in a surprising, crazy moment of the movie. It is directed by Bong Joon-ho of Parasite fame and Snowpiercer fame and The Host fame and Okja fame. People love this guy. Do you know the star's name offhand? I love this guy, but I can never remember his name.
Song Kang-ho.
You do know it. Wonderful.
I do, yeah.
He's terrific. I just watched Taxi Driver recently. That is a movie. Have you seen it?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Taxi Driver stars Robert De Niro. A Taxi Driver stars Song Kang-ho, and it's about a brutal government crackdown that happened in the 80s in Korea, South Korea. I highly recommend it. But we're talking about Memories of Murder, where he plays a cop. What do you think of it?
I loved this movie. I had to remind myself early on too. I was like, "Gosh, this is," and not in any sort of way, but complimentary. But I was like, "Gosh, this reminds me a lot of Zodiac." And I remembered, like, "Oh no, wait, this came out several years before Zodiac." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, Zodiac is actually a lot like this movie. It's just almost immediately compelling. The acting is phenomenal. It's immediately just such a gripping, interesting story. The acting is so good. The characters are so well played. Everything is so interestingly shot. It's great. I immediately gave this thing 5 stars and went in and updated my top movies of. I did it for 2005 because that's the year it came out in America. But regardless of like what year you put it in, I think it would be one of the top movies of whatever year it would classify in. I think it's a undeniable classic. It was incredible, really. I think it's great.
We should talk a little about why you and I and pretty much anyone who's seen both movies would compare this and Zodiac, which came out in 2007, directed by David Fincher and starring everyone.
Yeah.
It's about the police and journalistic investigation of the Zodiac killings in the United States. Memories of Murder is actually about a completely different, very real life serial killing. Is the first known serial killing in South Korea, but both were unsolved for a very long time. In fact, the South Korea one has since been solved, I believe. Bong Joon-ho, I read an interview with him recently where he said, he was fascinated to see what the killer's face actually looked like, because you never find out in Memories of Murder. Spoiler alert, but if you've seen Zodiac, you know that this is how Memories of Murder ends too. You never definitively find out who the killer is. I think he was interviewed quite a bit of time after that was revealed, and he said he's still processing now, knowing what the face of that killer looked like, and he praised the police who caught him. It's really interesting. This movie also reminded me a lot of Prisoners, the Denis Villeneuve movie, because of how men who are mentally impaired were targeted because they creep people out. And the same thing happens in Prisoners in a really chilling way. And that scene where the guy who they suspected from the beginning stabs one of the cops with a nail and then runs and meets his demise because of his running. That was such a crazy scene. And you see very similar things in Prisoner with Paul Dano's character. But all great movies.
All great movies. And I even spotted a little bit, I was feeling, definitely felt, some Fincher. The Prisoners connection I actually didn't make until you said that. So I'm really glad you said that. But I even felt, and maybe it's just because I watched this recently, but I watched Jaws over the 4th of July. And I even felt a little bit of Jaws in this kind of watching, like, it almost sounds like if I was trying to think of how I would say this, because almost saying it out loud, it might sound like it's kind of silly, but there's those scenes where the woman is kind of walking through, the rice paddy kind of area. And then you can kind of just see, kind of just like poke his head up through the reeds, and like I said, it almost sounds like it might be kind of goofy. Someone just kind of like poke my head up through these, but it's like it's kind of scary, and it's kind of like there's always this kind of menacing character, but again, you don't know who it is. You don't really see the face. There's kind of like Jawsian quality to it too, where there's like always this monster that you kind of know is out there, but you don't know exactly where, and like you don't know exactly when. They figure out kind of throughout the movie how he's going to strike and kind of when he's going to strike, but they don't quite exactly figure it out. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. All those things killings are really interesting because the movie's quite long, but it's paced really well because there are big breaks in the case throughout, like figuring out that he always calls into a radio station to make sure a certain song is playing when he commits the murder. That's such a cool moment. And I like that moment especially too because it's solved by a character, a female cop who doesn't get a lot of respect by her colleagues. So it's cool to have that character in there. I still think that, this is still a 99% men movie except for the women who die. But what do you want? I was about to say it's a Bong Joon-ho movie, but he's actually pretty good at getting female characters, not necessarily be the focal point of his movies, but they're pretty heavily filled with female characters, especially his more recent ones like Okja and Parasite.
And she gets she does get a little bit of respect once the one detective. What's interesting about the two main detectives, who Song Kang-ho and then I can't remember the other actor's name, but Song Kang-ho is more of a I don't know if traditionalist is the right word.
He's the Jake Gyllenhaal of the group.
He's the Jake Gyllenhaal of the group, right? Where he wants the case solved and he just wants to beat a confession out of someone and just have it kind of done. And then there's a younger, more progressive, I guess might be the word, where he really
he's from Seoul. This all takes place in a small town. He's from Seoul. He has the background. He has some like forensic experience. I think you can say he's smarter. For a lot of the movie, he's calmer and more collected until he isn't.
Right. What ends up happening with them is how they end up meeting in the middle, where they both end up basically wanting the same resolution and willing to go to the same place to get it. They kind of both end up coming to the same place. It's organic, and it takes like I said, it's a lengthy movie. It's a shade over 2 hours, and the way it ends up happening and coming to the conclusion in the rain, because again, all the murders happen in the rain, which again sounds kind of like maybe a cheesy cliche, but holy crap, it works really well in this movie for the way they shoot it and the way that the action happens and the drama comes into it. It's really cool.
Yeah, that actor's name is Kim Sang-kyung. Yeah, it's terrific. And this movie also has sort of in addition to the rain, it has sort of a green hue over it, which is another reason why it's so easy to connect to a Fincher movie, which usually has a green or blue hue over it too. Gone Girl, Social Network, Zodiac.
Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Probably The Murderer or The Killer, whenever that comes out.
Right.
Actually, I think that comes out in a couple months now.
I think it does, yeah.
What are your feelings on Bong Joon-ho in general? I mean, everyone loves Parasite, but what do you think of his other films?
I haven't seen all of them, but the ones I have seen, I have really liked. I saw Snowpiercer right when that came out, before I really knew kind of who he was, obviously before Parasite was a big thing. So I saw Snowpiercer and I thought that was awesome right when I saw it. And I saw Okja right when it came out too, and I thought that was really cool. I thought Jake Gyllenhaal was just absolutely nuts in it. And it was another one of those movies where it was like, okay, he's becoming one of those actors who I'm just loving everything he does, and he's just willing to kind of do anything. I mean, he's a Hollywood leading man, and he's playing this like really bizarre supporting character in this really strange international film. And so it was a really cool piece in the Jake Gyllenhaal puzzle. That's the thing I remember most from the movie, of course. And then of course I've seen Parasite, which I think is, like everyone, I think is brilliant. Certainly one of the best movies of the last 10 years. Easily. And then now I've seen Memories of Murder, which I would certainly place very highly in any best of decade list too. So the only ones I haven't seen Barking Dogs, the first one.
Barking Dogs Never Bite.
Also The Host and Mother I regretfully haven't seen, but something my wife and I have talked about doing, because Parasite was kind of a big one for her. We saw it not long after we got together. And she's always liked movies, but I'm much more of a movie buff than her. She would have not started a podcast with one of her friends watching 100 years worth of movies, sort of thing. Sure. So, Parasite was kind of the first like international film that she had seen in a theater and, really kind of got fired up about and everything. So, Parasite was kind of an important movie and, early on in our relationship too. So we've kind of talked about watching the other Bong Joon-ho movies because we're pretty sure that they're going to be good.
She had never seen a non-American movie in the theater before Parasite?
Nope, never. And
so
also, to be fair, too, we live in a very, very small part of northern Michigan where there aren't that many international films that play here. I mean, they have to be like the biggest ones, to even get here. So
I take it you didn't get the first slam dunk.
No, not at all. Not even a little bit.
That's a shame. It was terrific. Yeah. So I've never seen Barking Dogs Never Bite either. And I've never seen Mother either. I think The Host is kind of bad. And I didn't like Okja either. I mean, I agree with you that Jake Gyllenhaal is doing crazy work in that movie. I think the little girl who's the star of the film does a pretty good job as far as like child actors go. And Paul Dano's fun and all the usual cast. I mean, the usual cast being what's her name? Tilda Swinton, who pops up in a lot of weird movies / a couple of Bong Joon-ho movies. She does a good job. But as a whole, like the CG slop of the whole movie, I didn't really get into. If you don't know, Okja is about a giant hippo pig. It's like a PETA kind of movie, like a save animal rights movie, which is great. I mean, we should be kinder to animals, but that movie didn't do much for me, and The Host didn't either. But then so for me, there's two different Bongs. There's the kind of exploitative. The Host, which is a silly monster movie, I found just really boring, and Okja. And then there's the, oh my God, Parasite. Oh my God, Memories of Murder. Like, and then there's the middle ground, which is Snowpiercer, which is very pulpy and very actiony and not serious. I mean, it's dark in tone, but you can't watch that and be thinking like anything but this is so silly.
Oh yeah,
but
a lot
it's
of fun
but
though.
yeah, it really works. Probably Chris Evans' best movie. I mean, I don't think there's not a ton of competition.
Knives Out probably.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
Knives
that
Out.
would be 1A and 1B probably.
Sure, he's good in the Captain America movies, but
Oh yeah,
nothing.
he's perfect. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
he's
There's
perfect for that.
there's not a lot going on in those. The second one's quite good, but it's not 3 Days of the Condor.
No, no.
Where was I going with this? I'm very excited for Mickey 17, even though it looks like it might be a little bit more on the crazy bong side.
Yeah, I mean, I get excited too. I mean, follow up to Parasite. I mean, there's going to be a lot to live up to. Going to be a lot of hype. Curious to see how it goes.
It's interesting, Bong now he's sort of across the ocean. He does Korean movies with American actors. I think Mickey 17 is maybe an American movie with some Korean actors. Or maybe it's an all American cast. I'm not totally sure. But speaking of movies that have crossed an ocean, let's talk about The Man on the Train.
Mm-hmm. Although the French version is just Man on the Train. There's no the.
Actually, I think they're both just Man on the Train. So let's talk about Man on the Train.
Yeah.
You assigned me this French film it came out in 2003. I have no idea when it came out in the States. You saw it when it came out?
Yes, it did. Yep, it came out in 2003 in the States. It was came out in May of 2003. I saw it. I'm sure we've mentioned this on the show before, but Brad and I went to the same college. We went to Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo. And Brad, I don't know if you remember this, but over on East Campus, they used to have the Little Theater. It was like a movie.
I do
theater.
remember. I think we saw Spirited Away together there.
That sounds right. Yeah, because I remember they did play that there. So yeah, it was this place called the Little Theater, and they had two different film societies that would show movies basically on one weekend a month. So you'd have like 2 weekends a month. There was like the Western Film Society that the college put on, and then the Kalamazoo Film Society, which is more the community at large. And the idea was that they would bring in movies that weren't playing at the multiplexes, which again was right up my alley. It was just fantastic. Man on the Train was one of the films that the Kalamazoo Film Society had brought, and I went to see basically all of the movies that they brought just because I thought it was so cool that they were doing it and I wanted to support it and everything. So Man on the Train was one of the films that they had brought. And also at the time, I mean, I was a religious reader of Roger Ebert. Even to this day, like when I see films that came out, when he was alive, I will go and look at his review. I couldn't find a Memories of Murder review for him, so I'm not sure if he ever reviewed that. A little disappointed, but I know he did review Man on the Train and he had given it 4 stars and had raved about it. So it's like, great. So I was really excited about it. And then, so I went and saw it when the Little Theater played it. I thought it was wonderful. It's a very simple movie, but it's just lovely, and the performances are great. I thought you would enjoy it.
So first, it wasn't Spirited Away. It was Howl's Moving Castle. It's like Spirited Away. That feels like something I saw in high school at my friend Anthony's home theater. No? Howl's Moving Castle. That makes more sense time-wise.
Actually, I remember seeing Spirited Away now with my parents, actually up in Suttons Bay, Michigan, because that was the closest theater that was playing it to where I lived at the time.
There you go. So Man on the Train, we should say what it's about. I thought it was great. I thought it was pretty good. But then I watched the American version, and in comparison, I thought it was great. So Man on a Train, it's cool because it's a French film, and like you said, it's very small, it's very simple. It's kind of a Western. Guy comes to town on a train and randomly bumps into an older gentleman of the town, and the older gentleman's pretty lonely and very nice, and convinces this guy to come to his estate because the guy who's gotten off the train has a migraine and he's having trouble. He needs water to take what does he call it? The solubles. They're solubles.
Soluble, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're like Alka-Seltzer when you see those fizzling in a drink. We don't really have those in the States anymore. Everything's either a gel cap or a chewable now. But if you're our age, you remember the commercials of Alka-Seltzer fizzing in a cup of water when you were younger. So that's what these are. And I'm sure you can still get those in Europe. Anyway, so he doesn't have water, so he has to go back to this guy's house to get a drink. And this guy who's just gotten off the train isn't really talking. And the old man is talking and talking and talking and talking. He clearly really needs a friend. He's an old poetry professor who has since retired and now just does lessons. And over the course of the movie, they become friends. The older man is infatuated with the young man's dangerous aura, and the young man is really taken by the old man's calm, quiet life, and the fact that he's respected in town by random people who he doesn't think knows him. Like everyone happens to know him or has been impacted by him. It's not a huge cast. The few people they meet have been impacted by him, and so the younger, it's not younger by a lot, maybe like 10 years younger. Mm-hmm. Man. And then it also turns out, you find out quite early that the young man is in town to rob the local bank.
Mm-hmm.
And the old man is dying to rob a bank. And it
Yeah.
never gets into like him actually trying to rob the bank with them, but he talks all the time about how he wishes he was the kind of guy who, when he walked into a room, women fell in love with him or turned their heads. And he wishes that he could rob a bank, and he wishes that he could pull off a gangster kind of haircut. And it's very sweet. And then the young man, I don't know. I don't think we really need to get into the ending too much, except to say that I did not like the ending.
Mm-hmm.
I like the ending of the French version a lot more than how it was executed in the American version.
Oh yeah,
But which was the biggest difference, I think, between the two.
certainly. Yep.
I still felt like, not what was the point. It did not feel like, not only was it not where I expected it was going, I often like when something happens that I don't expect in an ending. It just didn't ring satisfying to me in any real way. Like these weren't bad. Neither of these guys were bad guys. Like we don't learn that the bank robber is evil.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I didn't quite understand. Maybe you can explain. We'd have to spoil the ending to really talk about stuff behind it. Do you want to do that? Do you think it's safe to? Okay, let's say this. Fast forward 5 minutes if you don't want the ending spoiled.
Sure, because I mean, again, it's a 20-year anniversary. It's 2023, so it's been out for 20 years. Yeah. So what happens and I want to explain just a little bit about the casting of the movie too, because again, Ebert, going
Very
back to
important.
he explained it really well. The two actors that French audiences would know, Jean Rochefort is the older gentleman, the poetry professor, and the younger man, the bank robber, is played by Johnny Hallyday, who is a famous French musician. Ebert said this would be like, for American audiences, this would be casting Jimmy Stewart and Johnny Cash. So if that gives you a visual to kind of help understand the casting of what it would be like for French audiences.
That's interesting because so the only way I saw Halliday described was that he brought rock and roll to France.
Oh,
so I was like, oh, it's Elvis. I mean, like this is Elvis in this movie.
Oh, yeah, that could be. Yeah, I think that works too. Just kind of like any kind of rock and roll type of personality. I think. Yeah,
but he was also an actor. Like Halliday was a legit. He had been a child actor. He had acted his whole life. He's very good.
He's very good. Yeah, I think both of them are very good. And then what ends up happening in the end, both men in the movie, both of them have something very important coming up. It's building up to Saturday. Like I think the man on the train, he comes in on a Monday, and the whole movie's kind of building up to Saturday. They end up having to stay together because it's such a small town. The only hotel in town is actually closed because there's no tourists coming in. So the bank robber ends up having to stay with Professor because he doesn't have anywhere else to stay. So that's how they get to know each other and spend this time together. They both have something coming up on Saturday. Of course, there's the bank robbery that will be done on Saturday, and then the Professor has like a triple bypass surgery coming up, which he's very much not looking forward to. And both of those things end up happening on Saturday. Unfortunately, both of them don't go well, and both men end up dying through different means. And how do you explain it? They like cross.
Yeah, they both die, but then after they've died, it seems like they've woken up. I mean, it's too far after the doctors have called the surgery a failure, but you hear the machine beeping again, and he wakes up. But it's very clear he's not actually alive.
Yeah. So they cross paths on the.
Yeah. So the way it's literally shown is Halliday gets out of jail, and the Professor Rochefort throws him keys to his house. Right. And the idea being that Halliday is going into the gangster lifestyle and Rochefort is going to go live in the house. And they literally cross the street of each other and go into each other's lives, but they're dead. It struck me as just very French. Like, okay, they died, right? Like it's the end of the movie, so everyone has to die. I don't know. Such a sweet movie. Tonally, it just felt like a real kick in the stomach.
Well, I think that was, I mean, realistically, though, I think that was the only way that those two could have experienced that part of life, because it just wasn't going to happen for them any other way. Because, like the bank robber, again, he says, like, they have this conversation where, well, they have a couple of different times, I think, where even the Professor, like the night before it's going to go down, he's like, I want to offer you some money. I'm a small bank, but, please just don't do it. He's like, I have to, sort of thing, where it's like, there's nothing else he can do. And there's this, I think there's so many great little scenes in this. It's almost a little bit episodic the way some of these things go. And one of my favorite scenes is when they're in a restaurant and there's some loud, kind of boisterous people in there, and they bump into their table, the Johnny Halliday character, and Professor's like, oh gosh, they bumped right into you and you're not going to do anything. And he's like, of course not. It's 2 against 1. I wouldn't do that. And the old Professor's like, well, gosh, I've never been in a fight. So like he gets all geared up and he's like, I want to do this. I'm going to be different and I'm going to seize this day. And he goes up and tries to pick a fight with these guys. And it's one of his old students who loves him and like remembers him as it's teaching him poetry and like recites this poem to him. He goes and sits back down. He's like, yeah, the one time I pick a fight and it's somebody who likes me, like he really tried, but he couldn't do it. And I think that's kind kind of why that ending picked. That's why they chose that ending, and that's why it worked for me, because it was just they were too their lives were just too kind of set in the ways that they had been, where it was like it wasn't going to happen. And I also love that little moment where he goes up into to Johnny Halliday's room and he puts on the leather jacket and he does like the Wyatt Earp thing. I'm like, oh my God, you are so cute. Like, just be my grandpa. I loved so many little things about this movie.
My favorite scene in the movie is the reverse of what you're talking about. Okay, so the old man asks Halliday to go to the bakery for him because he can't stand how when he goes to the bakery, the woman behind the register always says, "Do you want anything else?" to everyone before. He's like, "No, of course I don't want anything else. If I wanted something else, I would have grabbed something else." So he asks Halliday to go for him so he can skip it. And then Halliday goes there and he's waiting in line and she says it to every single person. And then he gets to the front of the line and she's visibly nervous around him. So she just rushes him through and does not ask him. And then he goes home. And this was another one that was handled so much better in the front. We'll get to the American version in a second more, but it's handled so much better in the French version, where he goes home and Halliday tells Rochefort, "Oh yeah, she said it. She's incorrigible."
Yeah.
Can't deal. And Rochefort knows immediately that he's lying. I think you've convinced me, because there are a lot of pieces where they want to do the other person's life and they can't. There's even the part where Rochefort is going to get his pre-op checkup and then he gets a haircut to look more like Halliday, which remind me when we talk about the American version to bring that up.
Yeah.
And so Halliday is at the house when Rochefort's student shows up, and Halliday tries to do a lesson for the student in Rochefort's place. And it's shown as cute and like Rochefort or Halliday getting a nice taste of Rochefort's life. But if you really think about the lesson was garbage. I mean, he didn't actually teach the kid anything. He was just like, every book has a story. Now you see, right? And the kid's like, I guess. Sure. Yeah, very good. Actually, I love this. I love doing this show with you because I watched it and I was like, that was cute. It's only 90 minutes. It's a real easy watch and it was a fun way to spend my morning. But it felt a little disposable, and now talking about it feels much less disposable.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad. That's a really nice thing to say.
Yeah, it was good. Can we talk for a second about this American remake they did in 2011?
Oof, let's talk about it. And let me start off by saying about this movie. Number one, since I chose this movie for you and I've talked about it, I loved this movie. It's still my top movie of 2003. It warms my heart so much. Yeah, it's been top of my list. I love it so much. So I love this original movie. And I'm obviously I co-host a movie podcast, so I'm a big movie guy. I tend to have a pretty good idea what's coming out and what's going on. And a side note, I love the band U2. I'm usually pretty in tune with what's going on with them.
I will attest to your love of the band U2. We got into an argument when U2 released that album on everyone's iPhones that didn't ask their permission. I was furious about it, and you were like, "Shut up, you're being a baby." And I was like, "This is a major invasion of privacy. I'm so mad." And you were like, "No, it's fine." I mean, like, you are so into U2.
Yeah, well, that was the devil's advocate argument because I do think that was a bad idea, and I just wanted to, I wanted to be the one person on the other side of it, just to kind of stoke the flames. Because what a stupid idea. I mean, of course, even Bono now says it was a stupid idea. So, but yeah, big fan of U2. So like, I'm into all of these things. I like the original movie. I like movies. I like U2. I had no idea that there was an American remake of Man on the Train until I looked it up before doing this podcast. Like, American remake Man on the Train, it does exist. It stars Donald Sutherland and Larry Mullen Jr., who is the drummer of U2. And oh boy,
homie is not an actor.
No, he is not. He should stay behind the kit, I think.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Donald Sutherland, in certain scenes of this movie, I thought he was at least as good as his French counterpart.
Donald Sutherland's a great actor. I mean, no doubt.
And this script is almost word for word the same script. In fact, there is no one aside from the French writer Claude Klotz, because they just used the translated version of the script. Word for word the same. And it could not feel like a more different movie. And it's just so bad. So one of the cool things about the original is that they use sort of stock Western music throughout the movie. Because, I mean, you mentioned it a minute ago. Rochefort goes into Halliday's room. He puts on his leather jacket with the fringe and he pretends to be Wyatt Earp. And he's like saying lines from the movie in English. So there's that vibe to it. That really doesn't come up in the American movie, nor would it make sense. Larry Mullins, if he's hiding his Irish accent, he's not doing it well.
I couldn't tell if he was trying to or not, actually. Like, is he supposed to be Irish or not?
I'm not sure, because I'm not sure if he's trying to be human or not. He is so robotic in this movie. Yes, I'm here. I'm not going to do an Irish accent. It's just trash. Halliday doesn't have a lot to say in the French version, but he does so much with small, like, micro movements on his face.
Yeah, he's got a charisma too. Like, he's got a whole different kind of energy, like, where you can tell there's something there.
Yeah, and Mullins feels like, look, I know he's part of one of the most successful bands of all time. He does not feel like a member of one of the most successful bands. He feels like that dude who's friends with your dad who plays in a cover band at a small restaurant on the weekend. He's made up like him with his one hoop earring and his bad clothes. I don't know what they were. I mean, clearly the budget for this movie was very small, but the stock music, the score for the American version, it's got like a little bit of that Western twang, but it's mostly just sounds like real cheap C-level movie crap.
And it sounds like thriller music too. Like I even like I picked up on that. I don't like you know me, I don't hear very well some of the times, but like even I picked up on the score really well. It's like this sounds like cheap thriller music, like the movie from it sounds like it's in a different. It sounds like it belongs to a different movie.
Right, and the same three notes are playing over and over and over again. They keep and they do that in the French version, but it's a less irritating song.
Yeah, it suits the material better than whatever they were doing with this.
Right. So, for instance, there's the scene where Rochefort goes and gets his hair cut because he wants to look more like he's about to rob a bank. And they just cut, he has long hair that he parts to the side and he says, no parting. So they cut his hair real short and he looks like he might be the older gangster in a Guy Ritchie movie. Sutherland goes in and asks for his haircut because he doesn't want a parting. And the only difference is they slicked his hair back. They didn't cut a single hair off of his head. It's insane. He just looks like the same guy who happened to just get out of a shower. I couldn't believe it. When I was watching the American version, the scene where Mullins' character comes back from the bakery and reluctantly admits that the woman at the bakery did not say, do you want anything else? Or whatever the American version of that was. Mm-hmm. It felt so much more overt than the French version. It just felt so like in your face, like you don't miss this. Don't miss that this happened. Awful. And then, okay, so then the climax of the movie. And again, fast forward a couple seconds if you don't want to know about it. In the French version, when Halliday is gunned down by police, there's like a little bit of, there's a squib and there's some blood. No, it's not gory.
No.
I mean, it's gory in that it's gore technically, but it's not extreme in any way. It's like any 80s or 90s thing where someone gets shot. It looks like that. In the American version, there's a poof of smoke. And the way that Mullins falls down looks so fake. He just closes his eyes. It reminded me of, so the worst death scene in any movie, I think, until this maybe, was in The Dark Knight Rises when Marianne Cotillard dies. Because
not great.
No, she's just talking and all of a sudden she's like, bah! And she falls down and like doesn't stick out her tongue, but she might as well stick out her tongue. And this is worse than that. This has that vibe. And there's none of the like beautiful like crossing paths type imagery that they did in the French version. I assume because that wasn't in the script.
Right. Yeah, that part didn't come over in the translation somehow.
Also, I think everyone except for Sutherland is ADR'd in the American version, and it's not syncing up.
Yeah, I believe that.
Oh, I have one other really big complaint. There's this side story subplot in both versions, where the getaway driver, Halliday's getaway driver, only speaks at 10 a.m. every morning. It's like his wife left him and now he's just sort of catatonic. But every morning at 10 a.m. he says some poetry or something poetic sounding.
Some fortune cookie.
Yeah. And he's just like some guy. I think I've seen him in some other stuff, but he's not like a super famous dude. In the American version, they got Graham Greene to be that guy. Why? Why do you have Graham Greene? You know what would have been a cool movie? Graham Greene in the Larry Mullins part.
Yeah.
What the crap was that casting? You're caught up on Reservation Dogs, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. God, what a great show.
Oh, my God. Graham Greene's episode was incredible.
He was so good. Yeah.
With his eggplants and his star people.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I just happened to watch those in the same day. It was like total coincidence. And I couldn't believe how poorly utilized he was in the American version of Man on the Train and how wonderfully he was used in Reservation Dogs. And it's every native actor that is used in Reservation Dogs is given the opportunity to do an amazing job. And that's not usually the case in other things. And that is so exemplified in this movie. Holy crap. You have Graham Greene and he has 3 lines. Oh,
to do almost nothing, to say like what three lines or whatever it was.
Okay. 2 other things. One, I don't know French law, but I'm pretty sure the way that the robbery went down with like his colleagues betraying him. Pretty sure that's entrapment. So in the American version, that doesn't make sense. And the other thing is the opening conceit of the movie doesn't make sense. He goes to the drugstore in this small, I don't know, I'm guessing like a New England town. And he asks for migraine medicine and they're like prescription only. What are you talking about?
Right.
I get Excedrin migraine all the time.
Yeah.
It's over the counter.
Yeah. I thought that was strange. I wasn't sure like what kind of medication is he taking? Like, what do they got going on over there in France?
I don't know. And then Sutherland's like, you have to take these with water. And I thought, no, you don't. What is this? Beau is afraid? This isn't real. Did you have any other thoughts about this American nightmare?
It was a nightmare. And I watched them really close together too. I watched them back to back nights, and yeah, it's almost word for word verbatim. And it's just stunning how you can have just one interpretation of the script that works so well and understands the material and knows how to do something touching and like really poignant with it, and then another one that just like they're just trying to fit square pegs into round holes for the entire movie, and they're just hitting the nail on the thumb like over and over and over. I guess they can't all be The Departed. All American remakes are not created equal, and this one is worse than most. I mean, a lot of American remakes aren't as good as the international. I don't think that's exactly a hot take, but this one is, I think, worse than usual. I mean, I understand why this movie was buried. It took me 12 years to even find out that it existed, so that's saying something.
I don't think it got a theatrical run.
No, it did not. It was definitely straight to DVD, and this was even before me, 2011. So I mean, there were streaming and stuff at that point, but certainly wasn't the gargantuan behemoth that it is now.
Right. It's a Tubi special now, 100%. It is such a Tubi movie. It's right there with Kung Fu and Titties, which is a real movie. I just one more scene I have to complain about. You talked so beautifully about the scene in the restaurant where they get harassed, and then this old student. In the American version,
oh, geez.
just the way that so they're in a diner instead of like a French bistro because it's America. So, okay, fine. But the way the location is set up is there's no way for the rowdy youngins to actually physically touch our two protagonists. So when one of them like holds water over another one and tries to like lean towards their table, the way that Donald Sutherland says to Larry Mullins, "You didn't do anything," you kind of have to be like, what would he do? They didn't touch him. They weren't even really close to him.
It's so poorly staged.
Yeah. Do you want to go through our top movies of 2003? And maybe you'll just tell me where Memories of Murder would fit on that list?
I do. Yep. All right. For 2003, my top 10 of the year, number 10 is School of Rock.
Yeah, I've got that at number 6.
Okay, 6. Okay. Number 9 is Lost in Translation.
I love that movie. I love it.
I haven't seen it in a while, but as far as I remember it, it's my number 9.
I was a little bored. I watched it 2 years ago, and I was like, Sofia Coppola is not always. I'm not always vibing. Like On the Rocks, really didn't like it.
Yeah, I remember being kind of bored.
Go on.
Yeah, number 8, Clint Eastwood's Mystic River.
I like that movie. It is not in my top 20.
Yeah. Number 7, Finding Nemo.
Finding Nemo is my number 2.
Very good. Yeah, very good movie. Number 6, Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World.
Master and Commander is my number 17.
Oh, nice. Number 5, this is another one that did appear on some 2002 lists, including Roger Ebert, but didn't open in America until 2003. So I have it here. It's City of God from Brazil.
I love City of God. I probably have it on. It's like in my top 5 of whatever year it actually like originally came out.
Yeah, it'd probably be 2002, but yeah, for me, it's number 5 in 2003. Number 4 for me is American Splendor.
It's my number 5.
Amazing. Number 3, I have Shattered Glass.
That is my number 13.
Good. Yep. Hayden Christensen is just terrific in that, and Peter Sarsgaard also really good.
Amazing. You turned me on to that movie.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
At number 2, I have The Station Agent with Peter Dinklage and Bobby Cannavale and Patricia Clarkson.
I have that at number 12.
Excellent. Good. And then number 1, as we discussed, is the aforementioned several times, Man on the Train.
That's great. So I don't have Man on the Train on this list because it came out in France in 2002. Mm-hmm. But on my top 20, it would probably be number 18 or 19.
Yeah.
So just a couple from the top 10 that I have that you don't have. At number 1, I have Kill Bill Volume 1.
That's 11 for me. So
sure. At number 3, I have Tokyo Godfathers.
If you haven't seen that.
Yeah, I only saw it for the first time like 2 weeks ago. You got to watch this movie. It's Satoshi Kon only made 4 movies. Tokyo Godfathers, Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, and
I've seen that one.
Paprika.
Oh, I haven't seen that either, but that's also on my list.
Far and away, I like Tokyo Godfathers the best. Most people call Perfect Blue his best movie. I think Tokyo Godfathers is just way more heartfelt, way more interesting. Yeah, definitely check it out.
Yeah. It's been on my list for a while. So
awesome. Number 4, I have Matchstick Men.
Oh, I love Matchstick Men. Not in my top 20 somehow, but I really like that movie.
I'm obsessed with it. Number 7, I have Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah. You're not
as into it. Return of the King.
But it's good. It's good.
Yeah. Number 8, I have X2.
Oh, X2 is number 14 for me.
Except for Logan, I think that is the best X-Men movie.
Agree. Yep.
At number 9, I have Big Fish. I haven't seen it in a while, but it hit me hard when it came out.
Yeah, me too. It's not in my top 20, but I remember really liking it a lot too.
Sure. And then just for the sake of this podcast, I do have Memory of Murder at number 10.
Okay. I don't, I guess in my '05 list, and if I had it in 2003, it would probably be like in my top 5 or 6, right in there.
Sure. The only
Yeah.
movie I want to call out on this list that we haven't talked about, it's my number 20, but it probably drop off. It would drop off because of Man on a Train if I were to do Man on a Train in 2003 is Interstellar 5555. It's the Daft Punk movie. It's bonkers. It's an animated film, so weird. But yeah, it's the 20th or 21st best movie of the year. Thanks for listening to our 2003 list. We are going to be back next week with 1933.
Taking it back a few years.
If you want to know what is coming out next week, go to our Letterboxd profile. You can find me at Brad Garoon on Letterboxd. I think Jake, you're Jake Ziegler on Letterboxd.
Yep, it's Jake_Ziegler.
And both of us have pinned to our profiles our Never Did It podcast list. You could also just search for the Never Did It podcast list. And the 2 movies that will be discussed on next week's episode are always at the top of that list. So check that out. And thank you for joining us for Never Did It.